The island of Zanzibar in 1946 smelled of cloves and salt water. The streets of Stone Town were narrow and loud, vendors calling out, children running across sun-baked stone, the Indian Ocean wind cutting through every alley. It was here, on September 5, 1946, that Farrokh Bulsara was born into a world that had no category for what he would become. His father, Bomi Bulsara, was a cashier for the British Colonial Office. His mother, Ju, was a quiet woman of deep faith, a Zoroastrian, a Parsi, someone who believed that light always defeats darkness. She dressed Farrokh in clean white shirts. She combed his hair with careful hands. She told him, in soft Gujarati, that he was special. But Farrokh was not an easy child to read. He was small for his age, unusually sensitive. He would sit for hours listening to the radio, not playing, not running, just listening. Music did something to him that nothing else could. It stilled him. And Jen noticed that. She noticed everything about her son. In 1954, when Farrokh was just 8 years old, his parents made a decision that would shape everything. They sent him to St. Peter's School in Panchagni, India, a British-style boarding school tucked into the hills, 1,200 meters above sea level. He was 8 years old. He would not come home for months at a time. It was cold there. It smelled of pine and chalk dust. And it was at St. Peter's that Farrokh Bulsara first touched a piano. His school friends called him Freddie. The name stuck to him like something that had always been true. But what happened inside those school walls, what Freddie learned about himself, what he hid, and what he wrote home to Ju, that part of the story has never been fully told. Comment below. Did you grow up listening to Queen? Tell us the first song that hit you. Freddie left Zanzibar as a boy. But the young man who emerged from those Indian hills carried something hidden, something that would define every lyric he ever wrote. What was it? In 1964, the world was changing fast. The Beatles had just played the Ed Sullivan Show. A generation was waking up to something electric, something that had no name yet. And an 18-year-old boy named Farrokh Bulsara was standing on a dock in Zanzibar, watching his entire life get packed into 2 suitcases. The Zanzibar Revolution had arrived. Violent, sudden, terrifying. In January of that year, armed rebels overthrew the government in a matter of hours. Arab and South Asian families exactly like the Bulsaras, were fleeing for their lives. Bomi gathered Ju, Farrokh, and his younger sister Kashmira, and they left. No long goodbyes. No final walk through Stone Town. Just survival. They landed in Feltham, Middlesex, England, a grey suburb west of London. The sky was low and pale. The streets were quiet in a way that felt nothing like home. Farrokh enrolled at Isleworth Polytechnic to study art. He was thin, watchful, and almost entirely unknown. He wore his hair long. He carried sketchbooks. He spent his evenings in music venues, absorbing Jimi Hendrix, David Bowie, Liza Minnelli, studying performers the way a scientist studies a specimen. He was not performing yet. He was building himself. In 1969, he joined a band called Ibex, later renamed Wreckage. He was 23. He had 4 protruding teeth he was deeply self-conscious about, a voice that could shatter glass, and a stage name he had chosen with complete intention. Not Farrokh, not even a nickname. Freddie Mercury. Mercury, the messenger of the gods, the planet of communication, the element that cannot be held in your hands. He chose that name knowing exactly what it meant. Ju Bulsara received a letter around this time. In it, her son told her he was going to be famous. Not hoped, not dreamed. Told her. She kept that letter. If this story is already moving you, you know what to do. Subscribe, so you never miss what comes next. Freddie had the name. He had the hunger. But the moment Queen was truly born happened in a cold rehearsal room in 1970, and it almost never happened at all. What stood in the way? On July 13, 1985, at exactly 6:41 in the evening, Freddie Mercury walked onto the stage at Wembley Stadium and did something no performer had done before or has done since. He took 72,000 strangers and turned them into one voice. The Live Aid concert was supposed to be a charity event, a gathering of the biggest names in music to raise money for the Ethiopian famine crisis. Dozens of legends performed that day. David Bowie, Paul McCartney, Elton John. But when the footage was reviewed, when music historians sat down and studied what actually happened that afternoon, one performance stood completely alone. 20 minutes. Queen played for exactly 20 minutes. In those 20 minutes, Freddie Mercury conducted the largest human choir ever assembled at a live event. He called out a note. The crowd echoed it back. He raised his hand. They followed. He turned his back to them, and they screamed louder. It was not a concert. It was a conversation between one man and 72,000 souls. Brian May later said that Freddie was not of this world that day. But backstage, before the performance, something else was happening. Freddie was pale. He had barely eaten. He was moving carefully, quietly, the way a person moves when their body is sending them signals they are not ready to hear. The band knew something was wrong. Nobody said it out loud. That was the agreement, unspoken and absolute. He walked out anyway. He sang Bohemian Rhapsody. He sang Radio Gaga. He sang We Will Rock You and We Are the Champions, songs that had taken 6 years and 4 albums to build into monuments. And the world watched and believed that this man was invincible. Jabal Sarah watched from home. She sat in her chair in Feltham and watched her son on the television screen. This boy she had combed the hair of, this child she had sent to a boarding school in the Indian Hills, commanding the world. She felt pride so deep it had no word in any language she knew. But she also felt something else. A mother's instinct. A quiet, terrible knowing. Thousands of fans watched that performance and felt their lives change forever. What would you have said to Freddie if you had been in that crowd? While the world saw a king at his peak, Jabal Sarah was beginning to see the truth her son was hiding, a truth that would not stay silent much longer. What did she know that the cameras never captured? There is a particular kind of silence between a parent and a child that is not empty. It is full of things both people know but have agreed, without a single word, never to say out loud. That was the silence between Freddie Mercury and Jabal Sarah from 1987 onward. By that year, Freddie already knew. His doctors had confirmed it in April. A diagnosis that in 1987 carried not just a medical sentence, but a social one. HIV. In the late 1980s, that word alone could end a career, destroy a reputation, turn a legend into a cautionary tale overnight. The tabloids were brutal. The public was frightened. And the music industry had no language yet for how to handle it. So Freddie chose silence. He did not tell his bandmates Brian May, Roger Taylor, and John Deacon until 1989, 2 full years after his diagnosis. He did not tell the public at all. He went into the studio instead. He recorded. He worked with a focus that people around him described as almost frightening, as if every hour in that recording booth was a battle against a clock only he could hear. But what about Gia? People close to Freddie have suggested that she knew before he told her. Mothers carry a frequency that no doctor can measure. She had watched his face change on television. She had heard something different in his voice during their phone calls, a heaviness, a tenderness that had not been there before. She began visiting Garden Lodge, his magnificent Victorian mansion in Kensington, more frequently. She would bring food. She would sit with him. They would talk about Zanzibar, about the smell of cloves, about the piano at St. Peter's School, about everything except the one thing sitting in the center of every room. In 1990, Freddie recorded a song called The Show Must Go On. His voice was so weakened by illness that the band was not certain he could sing it. He walked into the studio, took one drink of vodka, and recorded it in a single take. The final lyric he sang that day was this: "I'll face it with a grin. I'm never giving in." Jo heard that song on the radio driving home one evening. She had to pull the car over. She sat on the side of a road for a long time. Freddie was protecting his mother with his silence. But Jabal Sarah was about to learn that the truth she feared was only half the story. The other half was something even the closest people in Freddie's life had never fully understood. What was she about to discover? On November 24, 1991, at 7 o'clock in the evening, Freddie Mercury died at Garden Lodge. He was 45 years old. He had announced his diagnosis to the public just one day before, 24 hours before his body gave out completely. Even at the very end, he had controlled the story on his own terms. The world broke open with grief. Candles appeared outside Garden Lodge within hours. Flowers piled up against the iron gate. Radio stations across 14 countries stopped their regular programming and played Queen albums from beginning to end. In Budapest, in Tokyo, in Buenos Aires, in Lagos, people who had never met this man from Zanzibar sat down and wept. But inside that house, Jabal Sara was not weeping yet. She was organizing. That was how she survived the unsurvivable. Through action, through order, through the quiet discipline of a Parsi woman who had fled a revolution, raised a legend, and now had to find a way to exist in a world her son had left behind. In the years that followed, she became something unexpected. She became a keeper, not just of Freddie's memory, but of his full truth. She spoke carefully and rarely, but in several deeply personal interviews given in her later years, she began to open doors that had been shut for decades. She spoke about the loneliness Freddie carried beneath the performance. She described a man who could fill stadiums with joy, but who came home to Garden Lodge and sat alone in his garden at night, listening to opera recordings in the dark. She revealed that Freddie had written her letters, private letters never published, in which he described feeling like two completely different people. The performer the world owned, and the quiet, frightened boy from Zanzibar who still missed the smell of the Indian Ocean. She said he told her once, in one of those letters, "Mom, the stage is the only place I am never afraid." That sentence landed like a stone dropped into still water. Because the dark truth Jabal Sara carried was not about illness. It was not about sexuality. It was not about the secrets the tabloids had hunted for decades. The dark truth was simpler and far more devastating. Freddie Mercury, the man who made the whole world feel seen, had spent his entire life feeling profoundly, quietly, achingly alone. And only his mother had known. Jabal Sara outlived her son by more than 2 decades. In that time, she did something with his memory that no one expected, something that changed the meaning of his entire legacy. What did she leave behind? Jabal Sara lived until November 13, 2016. She was 94 years old. She had outlived her son by 25 years. 25 years of carrying his name, his letters, his truth. 25 years of walking into rooms where his photographs hung on walls, and his music played through speakers, and strangers wept at the mention of his face. She never sought the spotlight. She never wrote a memoir. She never sold her story to a newspaper or appeared on a television program for money. In a world that would have paid millions for everything she knew, Jabal Sara chose quiet dignity over every offer that came her way. That choice itself tells you everything about who raised Freddie Mercury. In her final years, she worked closely with the Mercury Phoenix Trust, the AIDS awareness charity founded in Freddie's name by his bandmates, and his personal manager Jim Beach following his death in 1991. She attended events. She shook hands. She looked people in the eye. She represented her son not as a myth, but as a human being who had suffered, loved, created, and ultimately surrendered to something larger than himself. She also maintained Garden Lodge, that Victorian mansion in Kensington where Freddie had spent his final years, where he had sat alone in the garden listening to opera, was preserved with extraordinary care. His belongings, his art collection, his piano, the garden he had loved. Jay understood something that the music industry, the media, and even some of Freddie's closest friends had missed entirely. Freddie Mercury was not just a performer. He was a son, a frightened boy from Zanzibar who had been handed the whole world and had never quite known what to do with it when the lights went down. She had known that boy before the costumes, before the mustache, before the stadiums and the platinum records, and the name that would outlive every person in this story. She had known Farrakh, and in knowing Farrakh, in loving him completely, without condition, across oceans and decades in silence, Jabal Sara had given the world its greatest gift without ever once standing on a stage. The music did not begin with a microphone. It began with a mother's hands combing a quiet boy's hair in Zanzibar, whispering that he was special. If this story stayed with you, there is more waiting. the untold lives behind the greatest legends in music history. Stay curious.